Good afternoon and welcome to our first IIKZ webinar for 2021 in collaboration with Allianz. What a befitting topic to kickstart the year, both from a business and a personal perspective, as we continue to adjust to the impact of COVID in our lives. We certainly cannot predict the next crisis, but we sure can be prepared for it. So without further ado, I am now going to hand over to our Education Chair, Taffy, to introduce our guest speakers, Lesiba, Sethoga, and Senzile Ndlozi. Thank you. Over to you, Taffy.
Thank you, Leonie. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Taffy Chikanya. I head up the education for IIKZN. Today, I have the privilege of introducing our speakers for the day, and also take the opportunity to offer my gratitude to Allianz for partnering us on this webinar. So we have two speakers for the day. I'll first introduce Lesiba and then introduce Senzile. So we have Lesiba Sethoga, who heads up marketing and communications for Allianz in South Africa. He has over 18 years of experience in marketing and communications within financial services. He holds a BTech in Public Relations Management from Tshwane University of Technology and a postgrad diploma in management practice from Henley Business School. He is a chartered marketer and chartered public relations professional with the Marketing Association of South Africa and Public Relations Institute of South Africa, respectively. Our other speaker is Senzile Ndlozi, who is the Business Development Manager of Allianz Africa, a role she has held since 2017. She is responsible for growing sales and distribution for the business across lines of business that spread from energy, construction, financial lines, liability, mid-corporate property, as well as Pan-African and international insurance programs. She has over 15 years of experience in risk management, insurance, and holds a BCom degree from the University of South Africa. With that, over to you, Senzile and Lesiba. Thank you.
Many thanks to Leonie, the president of IIKZN, and Taffy, who heads up the education part of the institute. We certainly are privileged and honored as Allianz to partner with the Insurance Institute of Kwa-Zulu Natal. KZN is very close to my heart because I've done 7 comrades in that part of the world. And obviously COVID got in the way. And so I think it's great to partner with them. We appreciate everyone for joining through. Thanks for your time. We know that time is valuable, so we'll really try and share thought leadership and nuggets that I think could really add value in terms of your business. So the focus really today, myself and Senzile will touch through mainly on the topic of how to build resilience, particularly through a storm we're facing in COVID. And obviously, it's important to really learn from an insights perspective based on the research that we've done from our anchor report, Allianz Risk Barometer 2021, which was launched this year. So before we go into the report, which Senzile will cover the majority of, I will take you through a bit about Allianz. I think it's important for us to take you through Allianz in terms of to demonstrate the resilience of the business that we work for, because I think it's important for us to demonstrate that. It would be remiss of us to share about business resilience when we're not demonstrating the resilience of Allianz as a business. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. And so this slide here, it might take a while to come up on your screen. But this slide here talks about Allianz Group. And so Allianz is one of the largest financial service providers in the world. In terms of employees, we have over, or at least around 150 employees. From a customer perspective, we have over 100 million customers in more than 70 countries. Just in terms of the continent, we operate in over 12 countries. And from a historical perspective, we were established in Germany in 1890, so that's many years ago. And in Africa, we started operating in 1912. And the business was actually launched in Algeria, and then it came through to South Africa in the 1940s. So that gives you an idea, I guess, of the resilience of the business that, we're still growing and very strong since 1890. So on the insurance side, we are certainly a market leader in Germany. And as I said, I spoke about the international presence in Europe, in North America, Asia Pac, which is one of our growth areas, and of course, Africa is also a growth area within Africa. And some of you may have seen some of the acquisitions that we've had in East Africa recently, and also in Nigeria. And I think also, just to demonstrate the point about resilience, is that in the past financial year, from a revenue perspective, we achieved around 140 billion euros, which is very significant and shows the strength of our business. And also, we are not just an insurer, we are one of the largest asset managers in the world. And you can see the significant assets in management that we have as a business. And this slide here, which is coming up on your side, also is just touches on some of the financial indicators. So, for example, while even operating within a COVID environment, we're still very profitable at about 10.8 billion euros in terms of profit. So, and I think what's pleasing is that we are able to pay dividends. I know quite a number of insurers and financial service players haven't been able to do that, but I think it's good that we've got the strength and the capacity to be able to do that. And that links very strongly in terms of our solvency as well. And I think the indicators are clear. Yes, COVID has had an impact, but I think that some of you may have seen the Q1 results that were released yesterday, and we are doing a lot stronger, particularly on the life and health and also on the asset management side. And we expect the property and casualty sector to also pick up. I'm just going to move on to the next slide. And this slide, as it comes up, focuses on the unit of Allianz, which is a key global line. The company is called Allianz Global Corporate Specialty, the company that Senzile and I work for, and also Olivia in the background. It's a significant player within the property and casualty insurance segment within Allianz, and our focus is on corporate specialty insurance. We do offer alternative risk transfer and capital solutions worldwide. You can see the number of employees, just about around 4,400. And the diversity also within the business with 83 nationalities and operating in 31 countries in terms of brick and mortar offices. But we have a reach through Allianz, the Allianz network, where we can do business in more than 200 countries and territories. So I think what's important is also that our portfolio is highly diversified from a risk perspective, and that from an international business perspective, we've got close to 3,000 lead programs, and so very reliable in terms of moving with our clients, our partners across the world, and largely because of our market leading capacity and strong ratings, which you can see there. And this slide here, I won't spend too much time on it because I'm sure most of you are aware in terms of our offering. And I'll just highlight what we're offering within the African market. So energy and construction are very much strong within the African continent in terms of our offering. Financial lines, we did quite a number of webinars. Some of you may have attended some of them focusing on D&O a couple of weeks ago. So that's an area that we play in. Liability, mid-corp, which is, I suppose, locally more of the commercial space for entities starting with a revenue of about, or at least about $500 million. So a property, and we have Ronald who heads a property who will be part of the Q&A towards the end. And it's a significant part of our business, property insurance. So the services below are pretty much offered also within our business, and so that gives you an idea there. I want to move on to the next slide. As it comes up, this really is just an aside to say from a business perspective, we also are privileged to partner with one of the largest movements in the world, the Olympic movement, a partnership we signed up early this year. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to really make an impact globally in terms of sport and humanity. I'm going to move to the next slide, which focuses on the risk barometer, and I'll spend a bit of time here just to give the context that we published it this year, and the risk barometer is really our leading research and report. It was our 10th, it's our 10th one this year, the biggest yet. We've received 2,769 respondents from 92 countries. And I think I want to pause here and also thank most of you, because I know that you would have participated as members of the Insurance Institute of South Africa. So we've partnered with insurance organizations, risk management associations in South Africa and many other countries. And just to give you an idea, when we started participating from an African perspective in 2016, we only had South Africa as the only country in the continent that produced the top 10 results that enables us to share the results with the insurance broking and also the media. And I think what's been good is that we've since moved with the partnerships that we have to where we have around 8 countries in Africa where we are able to produce top 10 results. And so Senzile will take you through some of those today. Some of the countries, for example, includes the likes of Nigeria, Kenya, and I know some of you do business in those countries. So I think some of the insights might be helpful there. Of course, we do have a number of colleagues within the business that take part in the risk barometer. And also, it really is from a seniority perspective, it starts at a CEO level in terms of people that participate in the survey. And so what we ask them is to select the industry about which they are particularly knowledgeable about, and to name up to 3 risks which they believe are of the most important. So as I said, Senzile will touch on that. And I think in terms of just to give you an idea in terms of the completion rates from a sector perspective, large industries contributed the most, so it made up about 44%, and followed up by mid-sized enterprises with a completion rate of about 18%. And closing in were small enterprises. In fact, small enterprises were second with about 38%, so that I can correct that. So I hope, I think you have a better understanding in terms of Allianz and also AGCS and how we are placed within the group and the offering that we have. So I will move over to Senzile to take you through the highlights of the risk barometer. Over to you, Senzile.
Thank you so much, Lesiba. Before I begin, I just want to welcome myself to everybody. My name is Ndlozi. And before I begin as well, I just wanted to tell everybody, please feel free to ask any questions on the Q&A tab right on the bottom hand side of the laptop. You can type in your questions during the course of the presentation, and later on what we will do is answer these questions. We've got fantastic colleagues of mine. We've got Ronald, who's also part of the webinar. He is the head of property, and he will be engaging us as well a little later on in the presentation. Anyway, next slide, please, Lesiba. Thank you so much. So I think Lesiba has done a fantastic introduction into the Allianz Risk Barometer. It's a survey that we do. We conduct once a year. It's an annual survey, and we talk to various businesses. So what I'm going to share with you today is the top 10 global business risks for the world, so in a global context, and then I'll bring it back to the continent. And lastly, I will share exactly what is top of mind for a lot of the businesses in South Africa as well. Let's start off with number one. With 41% of our respondents of the survey, they've said to us, business interruption, including supply chain disruption, is their biggest risk as an organization at a global scale. Now, what's interesting with business interruption is we've done this survey for 10 years in a row. And out of the 10 years, business interruption has sat at number one 8 times. Essentially, what that tells us is many businesses are really concerned about interruptions to their business, but they're not only looking at it from a traditional perspective. So they're saying, we're concerned about our businesses being interrupted from insured perils such as fire and many other storms and whatnot. But also what we're finding is because of the world we operate in, the number of non-damage risks that are impacting businesses are seemingly increasing year on year. So look, business disruption is sitting at number one, including supply chain disruption. For us as Allianz, what we've done in the past is we've been very detailed in terms of our underwriting when it came to understanding exactly what the supply chain of our clients entails. And this is something we've done for many, many years. And what we've seen with COVID is that we've seen the impact of disruptions into the supply chain. So I think a couple of years ago, there was a metal steel disruption. I think it was ArcelorMittal who had a steel issue. I think there could have been a potential claim or a fire in one of the operations, and it impacted a lot of other businesses within the steel industry. In fact, it was a global issue that we picked up as well. And it's quite interesting that business interruption is sitting at number one with 41% of the respondents. If you look at it, there's a little square tab over there where we have it at number 2 last year. So we see that the number of respondents are increasing, and they're saying, look, we have an issue with business interruption. We think it's our biggest risk. And one of the things we would ask you as an insurer is to engage your clients in terms of exactly what these concerns are, and also delve deep into how their business interruption calculations are made. I think what we've picked up over the years is there's a lot of confusion at times in terms of what exactly is business interruption for customers, and COVID has proved or will prove to be the true test of what that means. And as an insurer, we've seen a number of claims trickle through from COVID, but we haven't, there is a number of them which we've settled as well, but we really haven't gotten to the meat of the matter in terms of how many businesses have been significantly impacted by COVID and thereby being interrupted. If you look at number 2, the second risk with 40% of the respondents, we've got the pandemic outbreak. This can be expected. I mean, at the time of the survey, it was 2020. We were in the midst of the COVID outbreak. And so what essentially we learned from the survey is that our businesses are saying, look, we are concerned about the health of our staff. We are concerned about the health of our families. We are concerned about everything else that is presented or that comes along with the issue that relates to the pandemic. How do we now work with the workforce with the new normal? Now, in terms of the service industry, I think a lot of us may be in that industry. We were impacted, but I believe a lot more in the manufacturing space. They felt that even more significantly than we did. So yeah, there was a lot of concern from a health perspective, business-wise, family-wise, workforce-wise, as well as just the general restrictions and movements. I mean, there was a time when we couldn't leave our homes, and this impacted business significantly, and hence why it's showing up at number 2. If you look at this now, the interesting thing about the pandemic outbreak risk is that it had never in the last 10 years made it to the top 10 before, and it can be expected. Very few businesses anticipated that we would have a pandemic outbreak. So yeah, it's moved up from previously sitting at number 17, it's currently sitting at number 2. And in a number of countries as well, it's sitting at number 1 because it is the most topical issue right now at a global perspective. Number 3, we've got cyber incidences. Cyber, again, is sitting at number 3 with 40% of our respondents. It was last year's number 1 risk from a global perspective. And when we're speaking cyber, I think within the insurance space, a lot of discussions, a lot of training, a lot of investment has gone into cyber education. We've spoken to the industry, we've spoken to our clients about cyber. Some of the biggest challenges that we encountered was getting our clients to actually buy into a cyber product, to buy the cyber and see themselves as being exposed to a cyber incident. But what the COVID environment did is it really sort of accelerated everything, because suddenly we were all working remotely. We had IT systems to link up to, and suddenly businesses were thinking around concepts like, you know, do I have an exposure to cyber crime? What are my other IT systems like? Are they resilient? What if I have an IT failure or an outage? What happens when I get a data breach? And also there was implications with POPIA being enacted, the fines and penalty element coming into the fold as well. And also just talking about cyber, I don't want to delve too much. I think everyone's really dedicated a lot of time and energy into cyber, but a lot of the time when we think about a cyber crime, most times people would say to us, look, I'm thinking about a third-party hacker coming into my business, encrypting, wanting some form of ransom. And if you think about the number of cryptocurrencies that are out there now, I mean, geez, these hackers really have it good. They can sort of diversify, and they would want to be paid in different denominations of crypto. So it is at the norm. But also what is important with cyber is the education of the employee, because in some instances a cyber incident is not as a result of a hacker. It's essentially just the lack of information by our very own employees, and thereby opening up our servers, our businesses, to a third party coming in and hacking. So what we do well at Allianz, and I thought this is really a brilliant suggestion for anybody else, is we have these bite-sized training sessions. They take about 5-10 minutes. You literally go through it. They educate us in 5 minutes. Every 2 to 3 days, you do a quick test, and it's over and done with. But it's so continuous and consistent. It's at the top of our heads. We're always thinking about a spoofing incident. We're always looking at a link that looks sort of funny, and if it is funny, we don't press the button. So it's really sometimes about educating your own staff in order for them to avoid being exposed to something from the outside. Also, another thing I wanted to share with cyber is that as of April 2020, the FBI actually reported a 300% increase in cyber incidences as a result of us working remotely. So what essentially that tells us is that hackers are thinking, and they too are accelerating their hacking capabilities and are hacking more and more businesses, because they realize we're no longer in the office, you're exposed at home with your own little laptop, and I suppose you could easily be swayed. So something really we need to look out for and keep informing our clients as well as our businesses, just to make sure that we are on top of it. Interestingly as well, one of the things we would recommend for businesses is to continuously do a penetration test. Get a third-party entity, get them to do a penetration test, and just test your systems and see how well the firewalls work and the security system in itself. Anyway, that's enough about cyber. I'd like to move on now to market developments, and that's sitting at number 4 with 19% of the respondents. If you look at this, market developments was sitting at number 5 last year. It's come up a little bit, and it tells us something interesting. It says that businesses are really concerned about volatility, and with COVID and the pandemic outbreak, we saw a lot of volatility in the markets. We saw intensified competition and new entrants. Now, that's also quite interesting, because intensified competition and new entrants is a wonderful thing for the consumer, but is a scary thing also for businesses. And with the COVID environment, it sort of really allowed that environment to thrive. It allowed for competitors to come in. It allowed somebody else thinking differently to really have an opportunity at taking on market share. Another one is mergers and acquisitions. I think in the insurance space, one of the most topical ones we all talk about quite frequently is the Aon's acquisition of Willis. We are all looking forward to that. We're trying to see the impact that it'll have within the insurance space. So that's a topical issue for us, and we'll see how that plays out. And then the next one is market stagnation. Market stagnation, in a sense, is very topical, because with the COVID environment, we saw a lot of the share pricing being impacted. We saw really dives in terms of the pricing of shares. So companies were saying, we're concerned the market is stagnating, we're concerned we're losing value. And also the last one was market fluctuations. It really speaks to market developments, and hence why we've got them at number 4 as a big topical issue for businesses. Looking at number 5, we've got changes in legislation and regulation. Interesting, it was sitting at number 3 last year. Today it's sitting at number 5, so it's come down 2 spots. What that essentially tells us is last year, trade wars, tariffs, economic sanctions, protectionism, Brexit were all very topical issues. But if you think there is one common denominator or thread we can take away from this, businesses were concerned about trade wars and tariffs, because if you think about it, the American presidency at the time, the Trump era, really put trade wars and tariffs in the forefront of business. He had the issues or the trade wars with China. There was a lot going on that front, and it's reflected there last year when it sat at number 3. So businesses then were concerned, saying, look, we're not sure what that means for us as businesses. We're concerned about economic sanctions. What if the US suddenly poses some economic sanctions in different regions and I am impacted as a business? And if you recall, under the protectionism banner, Donald Trump really brought on, as part of his election campaign, the slogan, putting America first, and he did that spectacularly well. But businesses were also saying, look, we're concerned about it because, well, what does that mean for us? By putting America first, will that disadvantage my business and all that? And then Brexit was also a big topical issue in 2018, 2019, and hence it'll continue to be topical because we'll see its impact over the many years to come. And then the last one is the Eurozone disintegration. It's something, again, that is currently ongoing, and we will, again, see the consequences as the years go by. If you look at number 6, we've got natural catastrophes. I mean, storms, floods, earthquakes, and wildfire. This risk was in 2020 was sitting at number 4. It's come down to number 6, and the reasoning for that is because there has been a lower number of natural catastrophe incidences when compared to both 2018 and 2019. If you recall, we had the hurricanes, the Hurricane Harveys, we had the Marys. It was a number of hurricanes that took place in the United States, and also we had the wildfires of California. But if you compare it to 2021, the number really showed a decrease, and hence why it's reflected here. Businesses are saying, look, I'm concerned about natural catastrophes, but it's not the main issue in my life at this point in time. And then number 7, as can be expected, most businesses insure against fires, and we expect this risk to forever be in the top 10. And most businesses with brick and mortar should always be concerned about the exposure to fire. It's come down a little bit to number 7 this year. Last year was sitting at number 6. Number 8, we've got macroeconomic developments, and that is the monetary policies, austerity policies, and that speaks to companies saying to us, look, we're concerned about the policies in whichever country they're in. Well, what if government starts imposing things about how do we save money as a nation? How does that impact me? The one interesting that dimension I wanted to add was the commodity price increases. This was initially something businesses was concerned about, but what's interesting is because of the COVID or the pandemic outbreak, we saw within the oil sector, crude oil, we saw the price decrease quite significantly last year sometime, and that was, I mean, it reached prices that we'd never seen before, and I mean, for some of us, it's something we'd never imagined in our lifetimes we would experience. If I had a warehouse and I could store fuel, I would have bought, but unfortunately, I could not do that. And also, just businesses telling us deflation and inflation, very concerned about it as well. I'm yet to experience deflation, but inflation is part of our daily bread. We experience it every year. And then number 9, we've got climate change, increasing volatility of weather. Again, in 2020, it was sitting at number 7. Now it's sitting at number 9. It's come down. It's no longer a topical issue, and that speaks to a number of things. One of which, if you think about it, when America during the Trump administration, what happened is America really had a different perspective or position regarding climate change. They didn't sign certain agreements. They really had a different perspective when it came to climate change, and therefore for businesses, the impact of that was it really came down the agenda in terms of issues that businesses was concerned about. But now imagine we've got the Biden administration, and with the Biden administration, it's come back again. It's become a topical issue. We're talking carbon credits. Companies are suddenly talking about what do we do to contribute to the carbon emissions? How do we reduce the number of degrees, the heat on the planet? I think the target is we are trying to reduce it by 1.5 degrees over the next, I think it's 3 to 5 years. And just an interesting point to share, as Allianz, we really have felt the impact of climate change, and the business has opted to take some drastic measures in order to contribute to this Paris Agreement, and our impact in terms of this 1.5 degrees reduction in temperature. And in a couple of weeks ago, we actually announced our exit from any coal-related businesses. We will not be insuring by 2023, and this is just a decision that is made beyond us as an organization. It starts from shareholder level, and it has trickled down to the business in terms of saying strategically we now want to do better in terms of contributing to climate change. And therefore, what does that mean? It means we need to start making serious business decisions, and that is to exit the coal market. Now, for us as a South African entity, or rather as an African entity, it was really difficult for us to accept the strategic direction we've taken, but we understand why we're going there. The challenge with us as an African operation here in South Africa and the rest of the continent is that because if you think about it, some of our biggest clients are coal users, for example, Eskom. And also if you look at the continent as a whole, a lot of the power stations are still utilizing coal as a source of power. So really we applaud my organization, but at the same time we are feeling it as a business, but it is still our contribution towards climate change. We are prepared to lose money in order for us to have a better planet, which I really think is amazing. And then the last risk at number 10, we've got political risk and violence. And this is something businesses are concerned about. It wasn't in the top 10 last year. It's come back up again this year. And it really speaks to the pandemic. And what that means is that companies are concerned about political instability as a result of the pandemic, because what we anticipate is there'll be insolvencies. A lot of companies will be going under. We are seeing this. Number 2, there will be a lot of retrenchments and unemployment, which will in turn spark some political instability. In some countries, there may be wars. We are seeing it. If you watch the news, you'll see some countries are really starting to actively engage in some serious instability there. And then terrorism, civil commotion, riots, and looting. So businesses are thinking about it, and they're saying we're concerned about it. What we would ask our clients and the brokers and everybody else to just start having these conversations with your clients and ensuring that there is adequate protection in a way that they are either insured properly, or there's some sort of self-insurance mechanism that's in place, where there's a contingency policy to try and sort of mitigate against some of these risks. Thank you so much, Lesiba. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Great. So the next slide just essentially speaks to the important risks in Africa, as I've mentioned, and the Middle East. I will just talk around the first 3. In the continent of Africa, pandemic outbreak, with 36% of the respondents are saying, for us, that's our number 1 risk. As I mentioned to you before, it's a new risk. It was never there before. No business had anticipated that we would be talking about a pandemic outbreak, but it's a reality for us now. And for the continent, business interruption is coming in at 2nd, and 3rd is the cyber incidences. The 2 other things I wanted to mention here was for the continent as a whole, some of the risks that they think about is if you look at the risk number 7, theft, fraud, and corruption is a big issue for businesses in Africa and the Middle East. So, I mean, if you think about Nigeria, theft, fraud, and corruption is a big topical issue, and businesses try to mitigate against it as much as they can. And also the last one, which is risk number 10, critical infrastructure blackouts is a concern for African businesses. And I mean, as a South African, I don't think I need to elaborate further. I am just grateful we have electricity day by day, and that's a topical issue for most most businesses as well. Lesiba, please can you move on to slide number 5, please? Fantastic. So the next slide speaks to the top 10 business risks for South Africa. Very similar to the global risks, but I thought I should share this so you can see what's at the top of mind for South African companies. The first of which is cyber. So very interesting for us South Africans. South African companies are saying, I think cyber is our big exposure, and I think they're very right, because a lot of us are working remotely so often. We just need to ensure that there's adequate cyber coverage in place, and our systems work well. And then number 2, we've got business interruption again coming in. With 39% of the respondents. What's interesting is pandemic outbreak is third with 29% of our respondents. I mean, I think at the time of the survey, South Africa was just just going through a lot, and yes, we were looking at the pandemic outbreak. However, at the same time, it became we didn't realize just how long it would take for us to come out of the situation. But it's still there. Top 3, pandemic outbreak is a new risk again for South African companies, and it can be expected. I thought I'd share also a risk number 5, which is political risks, violence. Political risk and violence. Again, South African companies, this risk had never been there before for South African companies, but even South African companies are saying, hey, I'm concerned about political risk in the country. I'm concerned about political instability. I mean, from a political landscape in South Africa, there's a lot going on every week. There's suspension here, suspensions there, and obviously it has an impact on the markets and in the rand. Also, there's this businesses saying, look, I'm not sure about a war, but they really, businesses does not like the political instability, and also thinking about the insolvencies that are currently happening in South Africa, and the number of retrenchments being experienced. It really is a valid concern for business, and one that really needs to be, we need to find a solution to deal with. The other risk that really is interesting for South Africa, besides the critical infrastructure blackout, which is sitting at number 6, is the shortage of a skilled workforce. Now, this is an interesting risk for South African companies, because what essentially they're telling us is we don't have enough skilled individuals within our sectors, and we would really like to get our people upskilled. And I think I was reading a research paper, and it is for the first time in many years that within the South African context, you find multiple generations in working for one entity, from the baby boomers, the millennials, the Generation Z. So it's an eclectic mix, but somehow within that eclectic mix, there's a shortage of skills. And I'm assuming from the baby boomers, the skill set is there. However, as it trickles all the way down, it really tends to disappear. And that is something businesses are concerned about. Let's move on to the next slide, please, Lesiba. Fantastic. Now, just going back to the 3 big topical risks, number 1, 2, and 3, and that's business interruption, pandemic outbreak, and cyber. I thought I'd delve a little bit more into it. The 3 risks are highly interlinked, essentially showing that the world is vulnerable because the world is globalized, because the world is connected, and because of what has happened right now with the pandemic, it has seriously accelerated how quickly businesses have digitized. Yes, we've mentioned it. We're doing it now. We're remotely working. We're remotely having this webinar. And what has happened for most businesses and what companies are realizing is there's an increasing reliance on technology from an operational perspective, but also from just making sales. Some companies now are online at 100%, and that's what they're relying on. What that does to businesses is it increases their business interruption risks. Again, as I've mentioned earlier, it's not about just the traditional risks that we know. Now you need to add on to the digitization. What does that mean for my organization? What does remote working mean? How do I make my business more resistant and able to cope with all the new changes? So yeah, companies are right now thinking about, how do I de-risk my entity? How do I reduce the amount of risk that I can control? And really that speaks to business continuity management planning. And what that essentially says to us is, many companies have used COVID as a test. They've seen the impact of COVID, and now they've gone back to the drawing board and looked at their business continuity management plans, and they've asked, how well did they respond to such a crisis? And interestingly, most BCM plans aren't as fantastic, and nobody expects them to be, but the one element that most businesses overlooked was extreme events, extreme events like a pandemic. But now companies are also adding to it and saying, look, okay, we've gone through a pandemic, that was an extreme event. What other extreme events are out there? And when it comes to that, we can talk about a global scale cloud outage. That is a reality now. That is a possibility now. We're highly digitized. Now you're working remotely. What if there's a global scale a cloud outage? The second one is a cyber attack, and hence why it's sitting at number 1 in South Africa. What if you have a cyber attack and it shuts down your organization? Is your business prepared for such? And imagine your employees working remotely, and then you have a cyber attack, and nobody can work from wherever they are. Very challenging. And then third is natural disasters, that are driven by climate change. That is a topical issue, yes, but how prepared are businesses for a natural disaster that may potentially stop the importing of goods and bringing them into the country, and therefore your business stops operating. And another topical issue is another disease outbreak. We companies need to start thinking. COVID was, yes, it may be the term eludes me now, but it's a phoenix. It's a once in a lifetime, a black swan event, and it happens once in a lifetime. But businesses need to be prepared for more black swans, because we don't know what the reality is. So what we've also learned from the survey is that businesses are outside looking to de-risk. They are looking at onshoring and offshoring. So if a business were to import a lot of their goods and even services from, for example, China, what businesses are doing now is they're starting to think, how do I bring those goods to my entity closer to me? So not only just looking at China, but they're bringing them back to say, how and where are the alternatives? I'll make an example. In America, you get American companies are suddenly thinking, yes, we are importing a lot from China, but maybe we need to consider building a factory in Mexico, so that should there ever be again another global disaster event, we can still get our goods from Mexico rather than China. Those are some of the interesting ideas that are bouncing off of many companies. So if you go through our Allianz Risk Barometer, we are actually able to break down exactly which sectors are concerned about business interruption. As you can see from the slide here, it talks about business interruption is the top risk in these sectors, such as chemicals, pharma, food and bev, retail, transportation, and mining and oil and gas. Very interesting insights as well. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the second one I wanted to talk to you about as part of the COVID trio is a pandemic outbreak, COVID and known surprise. What that essentially says is the pandemic outbreak was number 1 in 16 countries, as I mentioned to you, in Africa and the Middle East and many other countries around the world. And the sectors, we can break it down for you. In the report, it is there. We'll tell you exactly which sector thought it was, the pandemic outbreak was a big concern for them. What is quite interesting about the pandemic outbreak is, I've mentioned it, the acceleration of a greater digitization, remote working. It really has fast-tracked a lot of activity that would have otherwise taken us a very long time to achieve. Because the world is highly unpredictable, companies really need to be prepared for extreme events. And really, the pandemic has highlighted the downside of production and supply chains, especially that span across the entire planet. Next slide, please. Thank you. Sorry, it just takes a little long for me. There we go. Then the last one is cyber. I think we've spoken about it a number of times, and we've gone into it extensively. It's an important peril. Most businesses are concerned about cyber, and they're worried in terms of percentages. They're worried about data breaches. They're worried about their IT systems vulnerability, especially now being increased because of remote working. They're worried about ransomware attacks. They're worried about spoofing. They're worried about, disruption in their supply chains because everybody's online. There's many factors and elements that impact this. And quite interestingly, cyber is a topical issue for financial services, which makes complete sense for us as an insurer. We look to cyber. We do plenty of penetration testing within our organization to ensure that we are adequately protected. And as I mentioned to you before, we are big on training with the 5-minute bites on technology, just to keep the topic right at the top of mind for everybody. So yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier during our presentation. I said that criminals had adapted to digitization. They too, got ready because they understood that we are now working remotely, and a 300% increase in cyber attacks is a big number. I'm looking forward to the next year's number. It should be even higher. In terms of losses, we're looking at over $1 trillion worth of losses for companies all over the world, including South Africa. I read a report whereby it stated that many South African institutions, we were a target for some reason for these hackers. I would only assume because maybe they find it easier to access our systems and really get us to pay that cryptocurrency. Guys, thank you so much. I think that is all from my side at this point in time. Please do go to our website. We do have this wonderful report. It's insightful. It makes for fantastic bedtime reading. And yeah, looking forward to your Q&A. Thank you.
So we're going to do a couple of Q&A questions at the moment. So if you click on the bottom of your screen where the 3 dots are, if you could please post any questions that you'd like to pose to Senzile or Lesiba or Ronald as part of the panel, and we'll address those. So just a couple of questions. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. So question number 1 is, what measures can SMEs put in place in order to be more resilient against the risks that have been identified?
Ronald, do you want to take that?
Hi, Sherryl. Could you just repeat the question for me?
Sure, not a problem. Is what measures can SMEs put in place to ensure let me start again. What measures can they put in place in order to be resilient amongst the risks that have been identified?
Okay, thanks, Sherryl. I think it all goes down, to coming up with a business continuity plan. When you come up with that business continuity plan, you have to identify obvious, the risks that, the SME is exposed with. For instance, I'll give you an example. Say, for instance, when it comes to supply chain, whereby this SME has got, critical suppliers who actually supply them, a certain raw material. So they need to actually then engage that supplier to say, okay, look, let's see in terms of you suppliers with 40% of whatever commodity, and we need to establish, say, should you have experience any incident, what would be your backup plan? So it all starts down to engaging your suppliers, to say, okay, what would happen in the event of you having that disruption? And also you would say, okay, look, we do have supply A, but also we should then investigate to say, look, let's look to see if we can have alternative suppliers. So it all comes down to where is the organization, you have a business continuity plan, you identify, in terms of what risks you're exposed, you then document it, you then test it, and then on a yearly basis, you review it. I mean, I think you see with the COVID-19 pandemic, which came through, nobody was prepared for that, But however, I think those businesses who have been resilient, those businesses who have been fast, to actually adapt and also to engage in terms of how do we move on, post the COVID. For instance, the financial services, they've been able to, to adapt to the COVID-19 pandemic, where we've seen, people now working from home, where they've got excellent IT systems in place, and also, excellent backup in the event, where people, should anything happen while the person is working from home, I'm sure they would have a detailed plan to say, okay, look, people could go back to the offices, also adhering to the COVID-19 regulations. Thank you, Sherryl.
Thank you. So the next question that we have is, what are the key steps to achieving operational resilience in South Africa?
Can I just take that quickly? I personally think it's a highly dependent on the organization, essentially. And as Ronald has mentioned, it starts with your business continuity plan. What do you have in place? How are you prepared? How are you transferring your risk? How are you keeping some of that risk within that business? So the starting point is, do you have a business continuity plan to begin with? And are you testing it frequently? Historically, what we've seen is that there's been a number of organizations where there's tons of files in some dark room somewhere, and this is what they call, oh yeah, no, file number 65 has our business continuity plan in there. We look at it once a year. That does not work in the times that we live in. We really need to be very proactive. We need to test our systems, test the business itself. I'll make a classic example with Allianz. What we did is, I think more than a year before COVID, we tested our business continuity plans constantly. We had the emergency care. By the time that COVID hit South Africa, for us as an organization, we were a bit more prepared than most, because we actually stayed home a week or two before the country lockdown, and everybody could operate. So we tested it. We made sure everybody could log onto their systems. If there were any IT related issues, telephonic issues, we managed to sort them out. So really, for me, it's about being prepared and ensuring that your business continuity plans work.
Perfect, thank you. The next question that we have is, how best can our industry publish awareness of these identified risks to the general public so that we can actually extend our reach to the public who is uninsured?
I think Lesiba would love to get your insights on that one.
Sorry, Sherryl, I missed the question. Would you mind repeating it?
No, not a problem. So how best can our industry publish awareness of these identified risks to the general public in order to be able to extend our reach to the uninsured public?
Yeah, thanks, Sherryl. Yeah, obviously, I think what's important is using all of the marketing and communication channels that are available. I think in terms of, for example, the risk barometer, we have this is one of the many activities really to create awareness, obviously with the industry, and the hope is that the learnings from here can then be applied with your stakeholders, including the communities. But I must say that if you look at the risk barometer just itself as a report, we do a lot of work in terms of launching it to different stakeholders, whether it be brokers, business partners, through webinars, and a number of other activities. We do a lot of media activities across the world, so across broadcast media, print, online. And so, for example, in South Africa, we have a lot of relationships with the likes of ENCA, SABC, and also print media, because clearly a lot of people that need to be included in the sector would probably have a lot more, I guess, would access print. So there's a lot of print coverage that we get in terms of the report itself. And I think also, just as an add-on, is that companies could also include this as part of their CSI activities. So I know that consumer education is one of the key objectives that we have as a sector, and I know that for example, we have a project as Allianz in Soweto where we use it not just as a CSI project. It focuses on education, but we also use it as an opportunity to mentor and educate teachers and also learners in the community about insurance and also financial education. So I think that's key, that it's almost matched with their CSI activities. Thanks, Sherryl.
Thank you. The next question that we have is also around the pandemic. and obviously with the pandemic, we've seen how companies have had to quickly adapt and make plans to allow staff to work from home, obviously resulting in massive operational changes. So what do you feel are some of the best practices that a company can have in place to ensure that staff and customers are both taken care of in terms of support and service?
I'll speak on behalf for just as my experience with Allianz. The company has really put a lot of effort in ensuring that we as a staff are supported from a mental perspective, a health perspective. So we've had our health days. We've got continuous engagements from a mental health perspective, as well as just giving us support structures. If there's issues at home with the family, if somebody has contracted COVID, we know exactly what mechanisms, who to call, how to approach the situation. So that is what the organization has done for us. But also what they've done is they saw that with the remote working, there's also just been a change in terms of how the organization operates. And they've tried to bring us together with more engagement. So we're constantly talking as teams, we're constantly talking as a region. And also we have something special that's recently been brought up as a company, where we say it's called the No Meetings Wednesday. What that essentially means, the company is giving us a day in the week that is specifically dedicated to not having anything else but having an opportunity to do your work. Because what we've seen with the COVID and remote working, a lot of us have seen tons of meetings come into the calendar because everybody's talking to each other. We want to ask you questions. There's webinars left, right, and center. So the company made a decision and said, but on Wednesdays, nobody's allowed to have a meeting, with exception with our clients. That's the only other person you can meet. But as an organization, we just focus on the work. So there's a lot going on in ensuring that our mental well-being is taken care of. Our emotional state. I mean, we went through a change management session just to help us through the transition from normally working in offices to a remote working setup. And in the future as well, one of the things the organization is considering is to say, how well adapted are we to this new environment? And if we are, we are going to implement a mechanism where we are allowed to continue to work from home, but still come to the office as and when required. This is a reality for us. It's something that we will be doing going forward. So I really give credit to our organization, and would ask other organizations to try and implement similar setups should their business allow.
And then the last question that we have for now is, how can collaboration amongst insurers, both locally and internationally, help reduce the threats against the resilience in the insurance industry specifically?
Ronald?
Hi, Sherryl. Can you repeat that question again? Sorry about that.
You're really keeping me on my toes today. So the question is, how can collaboration amongst government, intermediaries, insurers, both locally and internationally, help reduce the threats against building resilience in the insurance sector?
Look, that's quite an interesting question. But what I believe is, I think, it's more in platforms such as webinars, the collaboration where, all these parties come together. We discuss in terms of, the events what we've gone through, the challenges we faced as, as an industry, or, globally what's going on, but also then how to, then tackle, the elephant in the room in terms of how then do we move forward going, post the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think that's the only way, we are going to get across, or to try and actually, resolve this, where, for instance, here in South Africa, the insurance industry, where we have, platforms. For instance, I'll give an example. We do have, the conference, which normally happens at Sun City, where different topics, are put. We have, conferences where people sit down and talk about these issues. So I think the more we talk about these issues, Sherryl, is how we're going to, resolve them. Thank you.
Sherryl, can I
So-
just add to that as well?
Yes, of course.
I think we also try and play our part in terms of creating resilience through such webinars that we're hosting, and I just want to give credit to Olivia and Lesiba, because they too have contributed in a sense that they have made it possible for the entire continent to participate in the barometers like the Allianz Risk Barometer. What that essentially does is it informs the entire continent that businesses need to be thinking about the top 10 business risks that impact them as businesses. We participate in many webinars, well, not webinars, but in many seminars, like the insurance conferences. We historically, we used to go around different countries and really share this knowledge. We don't keep it internally. It's not an Allianz report that stays with us. We share it with everybody because ultimately we want businesses and the insurance sector to benefit. And hence why one of the things we say during our survey report is, please share this information with your clients. Have these conversations with your client. Talk around the top 10 risks. Let the client tell you what they think is important to them, and then bring it back into insurance. And then you start talking to us as an insurer to say, these are the issues for my client, Mr. Insurer. How can we work together? Even with our risk engineering team as an organization, we've got a really fantastic risk engineering team that is happy to go into businesses and assist clients. I think one of the biggest misconceptions with risk engineering, or with the risk engineers going into clients' businesses is, oh no, they're going to go check and find out what's wrong. But actually, no. If we were to change our mindset about it and say, what can I learn from this experience in order to improve my business and make it more resilient? That's essentially what our role is. We try and empower the client. We want them to be in charge of their risk management, to have an entire program around how are we thinking about risk, who's responsible for X, Y, and Z. But that's the only way we will create a resilient industry in empowering our client.
Thank you. So we don't have any further questions at this stage. I'm not sure, Olivia, if you can see anything else on your side that we haven't addressed.
None of the questions have come through yet. So
if they are, okay.
But if anybody is
No, that's fine.
interested.
So yeah, if we don't have, yes, yeah, we'll give them one more minute. But if we don't have any more questions, would just like on behalf of IIKZN to say a very big thank you to Senzile, Lesiba, and Ronald. Sorry for putting you on the spot with some interesting and difficult questions. We just want to say a very big thank you for your time, for imparting such valuable knowledge and insights, for sharing the barometer reports and the risk reports with us. There's definitely some very interesting statistics there. Definitely a good evening read, Lesiba. And also just, we really appreciate your time, and it really has been such a pleasure to host you. We thank you again. A huge thank you again to Allianz for the collaboration and the sponsorship. And we hope that we added value to your afternoon. And that's it from our side.